We'll pick it up in the first main division, which is, again, it's rebellion. And let's get our characters in this story. Now, Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, gives us his family genealogy there, with Dathan and Abiram. So these two guys. So you've got this cohort of these three guys, Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And it tells us Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth. So now we've got a fourth guy. You've got Korah, you've got Dathan, you've got Abiram, and then you've got On, the son of Peleth. The sons of Reuben took men. Okay, now how many men did they take? So we're told, we're given four names here, and we're told that they took men. Verse 2, and they rose up before Moses. We get a little indicator there. These guys rose up before Moses with some of the children of Israel. Just some, it tells us. How many? 250 leaders of the congregation. Representatives of the congregation, men of renown. So we're told there that we've got these four men that got together and they rose up before Moses. Now, what does it mean that they rose up? Well, that's what we'll be finding out here as we go through this. But it's these four guys, and then they rounded up 250. There we are. Rebellion, response. What did I say? Rebellion. Did I say response? Mm-hmm. Yes, I did. Okay. Rebellion, response, and then residual rebellion. Here we are in the first section, verses 1 through 3. Now it's these four guys and 250 leaders. So this is no small group. Okay, this is no small group. Now, what are they doing? Well, in verse 3, we see the problem. They gathered together against Moses and Aaron. So 254 guys against who? Moses and Aaron. So you've got 254 guys standing against Moses and Aaron, or in opposition to them. Let's just start with that for just a moment. You imagine that this would have been quite intimidating, right? Some of us have a real issue, a really big fear of just one person rejecting us, or one person, in responding to us in a negative way. Just one. This is 254 guys that came together, and they're standing against Moses and Aaron. But what's the problem here? Verse 3. And they said to them, here's what they say, you take too much upon yourselves. For all the congregation is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord? Now, how many of you have heard of the game Two Truths and a Lie? Most of you have heard that. Okay, Two Truths and a Lie. Two Truths and a Lie. That's a game where you make three statements concerning yourself. And what you do is you share two truths about yourself, and then the third one is a lie. And you just stick that, you don't do it in any particular order. You just share three things about yourself. Two of those things are truths, one is a lie. And the game is that whoever's there listening and playing has to guess which one is the lie. Well, this is very similar. This is two truths and two lies, but they're mixed together. And really, they're sandwiched in between. The first thing that these guys say is a lie, and the last thing that they say is a lie. The middle is true. Let's take a look at it in verse 3. Here's the first lie. You take too much upon yourselves. Talking to Moses and Aaron. Moses is leading the nation of Israel. Aaron is, does anybody remember who Aaron is? What his position is?
The head priest.
He's the head priest, the high priest. He's in charge of the priests. So you got Moses, the leader, Aaron, the spiritual leader here, or the leader of the priests, and they're accusing these guys of taking too much upon themselves. And then here's the truth. For all the congregation is holy. Now, what is it that holy means again? Does anybody remember what holy means? Joel.
To be set apart.
Yeah, to be set apart. So holy doesn't mean that you wake up every morning with a halo on, or that you are so super spiritual that you never have a bad thought, and you're never disobedient toward your parents. That's not what holy means. Now, those, being obedient toward our parents is something that we should be striving for, but that's not what holy means. God had set his people apart as special people. That made them holy. God made them holy. So this is a truth here. For all the congregation is holy. They're all set apart. They're all God's. They all belong to God, I should say. Every one of them, and here's the second truth, and the Lord is among them. That was absolutely true. And God's going to show that again in this story. So they started with a lie that you take too much upon yourself, and then they went to a truth. All the congregation is holy, and the Lord is among them, and then they finish with another lie. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord? Now, why are those, does anybody know why there are, why is this a false statement? You take too much upon yourselves. Does anybody know why that's a false statement? In the back, young man. I know, you are, yeah.
That was just instinctive. I honestly, once I raised my hand, I was like, oh wait, I'm a leader.
But tell us why.
Because God says in other scriptures that, or in the scriptures also, that he does not give us what we cannot handle.
Okay, so God, what I heard in there, God gave them this position, right? He gave Moses his position, and he gave Aaron his position. Let me ask you one more. It's very similar. At the end there, the last thing that they say, the question, why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord? Why is that a lie? Yes?
They didn't exalt themselves.
Okay, who did it?
God.
They were exalted, right?
Yeah.
They were exalted to a position of leadership. But it wasn't, they didn't exalt themselves. It was God who exalted them. What this is envy. This is envy. Now, there's a difference between jealousy and envy. They seem to be, you're kind of like, should I use the word jealous or envy? And you're never quite sure. And then you go to the dictionary to look up definitions to see which one is which. And it's like, if you look up envy, it'll say jealousy. You're like, wait a minute. Are they one the same? Are they two different things? Jealousy fears to lose what it already has. In other words, you may have some position. You may have some position of authority or leadership. Maybe it's a position among your friends. And somebody else comes in and they threaten that. Maybe they're super nice, or they're the new kid on the block, and everybody kind of, oh, look at, they're really cool, and look how they dress, or, he's so cute or she's so cute or whatever, and you feel like, oh my gosh, they're going to come in and threaten my position. So you have the position already, but you're afraid of losing it. That's jealousy. Envy is pained at seeing another have something. So envy sees somebody in possession of something, and they hate that they have it. Let's go back to a leadership position. It may be that you have some sort of status in your little posse, in your crew, with your friends. And somebody else hates you for that because they don't have that position. They would be envious of you. Well, envy is what we are dealing with here. These four guys, along with the 250 other guys, they've stirred up 250 leaders. Korah, Dathan, Abiram, On. All of these guys are envious of Moses and Aaron for holding these high positions. But the problem is that what they said, you take too much upon yourself, God gave it to them. And then, why then do you exalt yourselves? They didn't. Do you remember the calling of Moses? Some of you are here for that. Others of you might have heard that story before. Moses was out in the wilderness, and he was with his father-in-law's flock of goats out there on the backside of the wilderness. But God came to him, and I'm shortening the story for you. God came to him and said, I want to use you, and this is what I want you to do. And Moses was coming up with excuses like, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do that. And, he was making it clear that he just did not want to go and be used by God to go lead the people out of Egypt. So Moses didn't choose this position for himself. He didn't exalt himself to anything. And he didn't take too much upon himself. These were things that God was putting on him. but we see these guys struggling with envy. Now, that into verse 4 takes us right in. I'm sorry, I forgot to put this up there. The rebellion is based on envy. Rebellion oftentimes is. Rebellion is oftentimes based on envy. And so is the case here. But let's look at our second and the longest of our main divisions, which is the response to this. What is the response? So when Moses heard it, he fought Korah. He got on his social media and assassinated his character so that all the world would know that Moses was not the problem, but Korah was. And then he challenged him to a fight. I'll meet you out in the baseball field, the furthest corner of the school, and we'll just handle this like men. Right? Does your translation not say that? Neither does mine. But that's where we go, right? Somebody comes against us and they want to attack our character or attack our position, some position that we hold. And oftentimes we want to respond in the flesh. Well, Moses is going to show us here how to respond in the spirit, how to respond spiritually, like a believer, like a follower of God. But we oftentimes want to jump right to the violence. Right away, we want to just jump like, boy, you cannot be, bad-mouthing me like that. And we can just square up right now. You can catch these hands. And we're ready to get on social media, bad-mouth them, and oh, look what they did. Or text all our group of friends. But of course, don't put that person in the group text, but, text everybody else. Like, oh, man, this is what they said. This is what they did. This is what she said. This is how she looked at me. But you'll notice that Moses doesn't do any of those things. So when Moses heard it, he fell on his face. I don't know. I think maybe Moses has something wrong with his equilibrium because he's always falling on his face. What is the problem? He's always falling on his face because this was his godly response. To fall on his face is anytime that you would fall on your face, and when they say fall on your face, it doesn't mean that he just keeled over and smashed his face. It means that he got down on the ground, bent down, prostrated himself. He put himself out there before these people and really before God. But what he's doing in that, you'll notice that he's humbling himself. He's lowering himself. Now, this is a dangerous position to be in. I want you to think about Korah and Dathan and Abiram and On and 250 guys. And they come against you to attack your character. They're threatening. That's threatening. 200, you really? You have to come with 250 guys? 250 guys got your back. There's only two of us. But the last thing you would want to do, or at least the last thing I would want to do, is not be ready to defend myself. I'm kind of one of those guys, like I'm not going to attack anybody, but I just want to be ready to defend myself. And I do strange things. Like if we go, I say we, if I'm in a restaurant setting, any kind of restaurant setting, in a room, period, I always try to sit in a position where I can watch the door. You go, what? What is wrong with you? Because if somebody's going to come in shooting, I want to know that they're coming. I want to know which person I can push down and run away. No, I'm just kidding. I just want to know that they're coming. I always want to be aware. I shared it was a few weeks back about some of the things that I do at home. Before I go out to my car, I always open up the curtain. I look around like, okay, who's out there? Anybody waiting out there to murder me? And then I'll go out, when I go out and I'm locking the door, because you got to turn around to lock the door, right? So I'm facing the door, but there's glass up on the top of our door, these little windows, and I'm looking at the reflection, like, okay, is anybody coming behind me? As I'm walking out to my car, I'm looking, if there are any cars out there, I'm looking at the reflections in the cars to see if is there anybody out there like standing out there getting ready to kill me? Just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean somebody's not out to get me. I always want to be on guard. And then this is killing me. Like, Moses, really, all these guys are ready to attack and you bow down before them? That's the worst possible position you could put yourself in. But Moses is not concerned, he's not like Pastor Chris, he's not concerned with defending himself. He knows that God's got his back, and we're going to see that. And so he spoke to Korah in verse 5. and all his company, saying, tomorrow morning, I'll meet you behind the liquor store and we'll fight. No, tomorrow morning, the Lord will show who is his and who is holy, and will cause him to come near to him. That one whom he chooses, he will cause to come near to him. Do this, he tells Korah, take censers. Censers were, they would use those to put incense, to burn incense in. It was part of the worship, part of the sacrifice. Do this. Take censers, Korah and all your company, put fire in them, and put incense in them before the Lord. So put a little bit of, some charcoal or some, something it's going to burn, and then you're going to put some incense in there before the Lord tomorrow. And it shall be in verse 7 that the man whom the Lord chooses is the Holy One. You want to talk about who's holy? God's going to choose who the Holy One is. And then he says at the end of verse 7, you take too much upon yourselves, you sons of Levi. Now, this is a big deal here. You sons of Levi. Does anybody remember? The sons of Levi actually had a position. God had given them a position. Does anybody remember what that position was? Anybody that was here for that might remember that? Okay, remember?
They're to take care of the tabernacle in the inner part of it, the moving, the pillars.
Yes. So they were not priests. However, they worked in and among and around the tabernacle. Probably just upkeep, but also when it was time to transport, they were the ones responsible for carrying everything. They were assistants to the priests. So he's just given us a little clue here that Korah and some of these other guys, they already have a position, but the position wasn't good enough. You and I have got to be so careful, because serving the Lord by sweeping off the ramp or vacuuming or taking the trash out or working in the back room on the computer is no more or less important than being up here on the stage where everybody can see you. We don't ever want to find ourselves working and serving somewhere and saying, these are just the steps to get to that position. I want that position up there. What I want to do is I want to learn how to be content with where God has put me. That's what I want to do, is learn how to be content with the position that God has given me. These guys were not content. And he tells them at the end of verse 7, he uses his own words, Korah, you have taken too much upon yourself. Now what he does beginning in verse 8 down to verse 11 is he rebukes Korah. Then Moses said to Korah, hear now, you sons of Levi, is it a small thing to you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself, to do the work of the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to serve them, and that he has brought you near to himself, and all you brethren, the sons of Levi, with you? And are you seeking the priesthood also? So evidently Korah wasn't content with just being a servant. He wanted to have the highest position of serving. He wanted to be in the priesthood. It wasn't good enough to just be a Levite. Verse 11, therefore you and all your company are gathered together against the Lord. There it is. There's the problem. There's the problem. The problem was that Korah was envious. He was envious of Aaron's position. And now he's got a problem. The problem is, you see Korah and Dathan and Abiram and On and these other guys, they came at Moses and Aaron, and they accused them of putting themselves into that position. They came against those guys, but Moses makes it clear in verse 11. He says, you've gathered together against the Lord. Now you've got a problem. You see, Moses understood that, and that's why Moses was able to bow himself, to prostrate himself before these guys. He was not worried. It wasn't like, okay, Aaron, I'm going to bow down, but you got my back, right? He bowed himself down. He fell on his face. That's how he responded. He didn't stand up, chest puffed out, and make himself, make his presence known, he immediately humbles himself because he understands that this is not an attack on him or his character. This is an attack against the Lord. Moses understood that. You and I would do well to remember that when people come against us, that we belong to God. I don't have to fight for myself. I don't have to, go on the attack and make everybody think that I'm the greatest person, and that person that's talking about me, they're not the greatest person, and they did this and they did that, and they do all these bad things. It's like, you know what? I'll just let the Lord deal with it. I'll just let the Lord handle it. I'm going to humble myself. And I'm not going to go on the defense. I'm not going to fight. I'm just going to let the Lord handle it. Verse 11. And he asks this question, and what is Aaron that you complain against him? Why are you complaining against Aaron? He hasn't done anything. Verses 12 through 15, you have this refusal of Dathan and Abiram. And Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab. But they responded, we will not come up. Is it a small thing that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey? Is that what Moses did? Moses brought them out of a land flowing? No. Moses is just following God. God's the one doing that. They said, did you bring us up to kill us in the wilderness in verse 13, that you should keep acting like a prince over us? Moreover, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey. So it's not enough that you took us out of Egypt, but you're not taking us into Canaan. None of that was Moses' fault. They did not go into the land of Canaan, you'll remember, because, chapter 14, they had no faith in God. They had no giant faith in God. What they had was faith in the giants. That had nothing to do with Moses. Moses was God's mouthpiece there. It was God that was doing all of these things. Verse 14, you've not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. Will you put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up. So they say to their leader, we're not doing what you say. Verse 15. Then Moses was very angry. It's like, finally, Moses, get mad. He was angry. And he said to the Lord, notice he doesn't go and attack those guys. He just speaks to the Lord. What a great lesson. That when you and I are angry and maybe somebody's doing something wrong to us, treating us badly, or maybe they're trying to attack our character, instead of going and talking to them and really, in a sense, wasting my breath, what I should really do is talk to God about them. And just let God deal with it. And God says here, Moses says to God, do not respect their offering. I have not taken one donkey from them, nor have I hurt one of them. I like that. We would say, man, I have not taken any money. I didn't steal anything from them. In this case, Moses says, I've not wronged these guys. I've not even taken one donkey from these guys. I'm not taking anything. And so he prays to God. God, you deal with them. And then here's the long section beginning in verse 16. God, the judge, renders a ruling here between the two parties. Picture a court case. And you're working for God. God's called you to a certain position. And then you find out that the judge is God who called you to that position. And these other people over here, this other team who are trying to attack you or come against you, are going to have to deal with God, the judge. Here's what God rules, verse 16. And Moses said to Korah, tomorrow, you and all your company be present before the Lord, you and they, as well as Aaron. Let each take his censer and put incense in it. And each of you bring his censer before the Lord. 250 censers, both you and Aaron, each with his censer. So every man took his censer, put fire in it, laid incense on it, and stood at the door of the tabernacle of meeting with Moses and Aaron. Now this is crazy. This is crazy. You know, sometimes you do something and then you wish, I really wish I wouldn't have done that or said that. And I'm just thinking about Korah and these other guys. I mean, just a moment ago, Moses was talking to Korah. And he says, you've not come against us, you've come against the Lord. And I feel like Korah, like if I hope that if I was in that position of Korah, that when I heard that, I would think, you know what? There's a possibility that I'm fighting against God here. I really don't want to do that. And so, maybe just swallow my pride. You know what? Sorry about that. Don't show up to the showdown the next morning like, no, you're right. Never mind. Please forgive me, and we should just be done with this. But Korah doesn't do that. He's got this hardness in his heart. And you see, that's what envy does. Envy causes us to make foolish decisions. Because all we're focused on is the item or the position that we want. And so we're not thinking about anything else. All we're thinking about is, I want that position, or I want that possession. And so Korah is in this place where envy has taken root in his heart, and it's really controlling him. And because of that, he's making these unwise, these foolish decisions, and dangerous, life-threatening decisions. Envy will do that. Envy will do that. When I can't have something and I'm not willing to trust God and just let go of that thing and say, you know what, God, I'd really like that, but I'm confessing that to you and I'm giving that to you, and I need for you to you work it out and whatever you want to do. When I'm not willing to surrender that thing and I allow envy to have its root in my heart, what it's going to continue to do is grow and grow and grow until it gets me to this place where I'm making dangerous decisions. And so you and I have to be careful. We want to be content with what God's given us. There's the temptation even to not just a position or not just a possession, but could even be a relationship that somebody else has. And why does he get to be with her, or why does she get to be with him? And that envy can take root and cause you, if you're led by that envy, cause you to do things that you never thought you would have done. Because I've got to be with that person. I don't want that person. I don't want those two to be together. I want to be with that individual. And so we've got to be so careful. So very careful. Korah wasn't careful. He was being led by the flesh, not by the spirit. He was being led by his envy. And so they're standing at the door of the tabernacle, and in verse 19, Korah gathered all the congregation against them at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Then the glory of the Lord appeared to all the congregation. What's going through Korah's mind at this moment? Hey, here comes the glory of the Lord, man. He's going to set us straight. We're going to hold these positions. I don't know. But verse 20 says, and the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron. Now, I don't know if Korah heard this or not, or if it was just to Moses and Aaron. Seems like it. Because he says in verse 21, separate yourselves from among this group, that I may consume them in a moment. This is what God says. God says, listen, I want you to separate yourselves from them because I'm going to destroy them right now, in a moment. And I want you to notice Moses' response once again. Verse 22. Then they, this time, Aaron and Moses, fell on their faces and said, oh God, God of the spirits of all flesh. In other words, you control life. Shall one man sin and you be angry with all the congregation? In other words, what they're doing is they're asking for mercy. They're saying, listen, it's not everybody. Don't kill the entire camp. It's this guy. He's pointing to Korah. It's this one person that's leading the rebellion. He says, you're going to hold everybody responsible? So the Lord, in verse 23, spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the congregation, saying, get away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Then Moses rose and went to Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. Everybody wants to see what's going on. And he spoke to the congregation, saying, depart now, leave now from the tents of these wicked men. Get away from their tents. Touch nothing of theirs, lest you be consumed in all their sins. So they got away from around the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the door of their tents with their wives, their sons, and their little children. It's this showdown. And Moses said, by this you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them of my own free will. This wasn't me, Moses says. Verse 29, if these men die naturally like all men, or if they are visited by the common fate of all men, if they just die like everybody else, then the Lord has not sent me. In other words, if they survive this showdown, well then, I'm not from God, Moses says. If something drastic, dramatic doesn't happen right now, then I'm not really from God. And these guys are. Verse 30, but if the Lord creates a new thing, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into the pit, then you will understand that these men have rejected the Lord. And in verse 31, something drastic and dramatic happens. Now it came to pass, as he finished speaking all these words, that the ground split apart under them. Incredible. Now again, let me stop for just a moment, because I'm not understanding Korah, but when envy takes control, what it does is it blinds me. Because these guys, Korah and Dathan and Abiram and these guys, they've been along for the ride. They left Egypt together with Moses. They've been traveling. So they would have gone through the Red Sea on dry ground. They would have seen manna falling down. They would have seen the birds come down for food. They would have seen God performing all of these miracles through Moses. It wasn't Moses performing the miracles, it was God working through Moses. And yet they're still questioning Moses' character, his integrity, his position. Why would they do that? Because that's what envy does. It causes me to block out the obvious. It causes me to block those things out. And it's always a strange thing talking to somebody that's struggling with envy. Because you can say, well, no, look, I'm trying to show you, here's the situation. In reality, here's what it is. And you're talking to them and explaining it to them, and they don't see it because the envy has blinded them. And these guys have been blinded. They didn't understand that something like this could happen. So in verse 31, the ground splits apart under them. And in verse 32, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households and all the men with Korah, with all their goods. So they and all those with them went down alive into the pit. The earth closed over them, and they perished from among the assembly. So everybody that was there with them, standing there, they were standing against Moses and Aaron. Everybody that was there, the ground opens up and swallows them. Now the 250, you'll find out here in just a moment, are going to be consumed by God. But whoever was with Korah and Dathan and Abiram, came out of their tents, they were swallowed up. They didn't believe that God was with Moses and Aaron, had put them in this position. Again, because that's what envy does, is it gets in the way, and it keeps me from seeing what it is that God has done and what he's performed and what God has accomplished. The envy takes root, and it blinds me and keeps me from understanding the situation, from understanding reality. And it causes me to think in the flesh, not in the spirit, and it's dangerous. Envy is dangerous because what it does is it kills me from the inside out. It rots my own heart. These guys were not harming Moses and Aaron. Moses and Aaron, if you don't know already, as you can imagine, they're going to come through unscathed, meaning untouched. They're still going to have their position. Nothing is going to happen to Moses and Aaron. Obviously, Moses and Aaron are still alive. These guys have been swallowed up by the ground, by the earth, and Moses and Aaron are still there, and they still have their positions, and God is still with them. They didn't hurt Moses and Aaron at all. They didn't damage them at all. But they themselves were destroyed by their own envy. What a scary thought. Verse 34. Then all Israel who were around them fled at their cry. You bet they did. For they said, lest the earth swallow us up also. That would have been terrifying. I would have run also. And a fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering incense. So first you have these three guys, and all of and whoever was with them were swallowed up. And then you have the 250 guys standing there who were told here in verse 35 they were consumed. The 250 men who were offering incense. Fire came out from the Lord. I mean, what a sight. Goodness. How dramatic. How drastic. God's ruling in a moment, just like that. He deals with the envious people, these enemies, not just of Moses and Aaron, but they were enemies of God. Even though they held these positions, working in the tabernacle. But here's God's ruling did two things at once. Number one, he eliminated his enemies. Again, these were not enemies of Moses and Aaron. These were God's enemies. He all at once in this one miracle here, this miraculous event, he eliminates his enemies and at the same time exalts his servants. Matthew 23:12 says, Jesus said this, and whoever exalts himself will be humbled. And he who humbles himself will be exalted. It's a biblical principle that all of us want to be familiar with. I don't want to try and exalt myself into some position. What I want to do is just let God do whatever God wants to do. I'm going to do my best. Maybe it's a position, maybe it's a captain position on a team, sports team. And maybe you would really like that position because you feel like you could really, give something to that position and do a good job leading the team. But let God do it. What you don't want to do is step on all the little people on the way up to the top. Badmouth people, talk to the coach. Hey, coach, here, let me just take that bag of balls for you. I'll carry it for you. Hey, have you heard about so-and-so? Or, this girl? Or did you see the way she hit the volleyball? Oh, my gosh. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is what Moses and Aaron did. What I want to do is respond the way Moses did and just humble myself. And if God wants to exalt me, he can exalt me and put me in that position. But if he doesn't want to, that's okay. Whatever God wants to do. What I want to do is set my eyes and my face and my attention on serving God, being obedient to him, not trying to chop down anybody else. It's always awkward for Christians, and many of you are working, you've got jobs. It's one of the things that I do as a youth pastor. People will contact me and say, hey, I'm applying for jobs, could I use you as a reference? And I always say, okay, I'll give you a reference, but if you get a job, are you going to stop coming to church? Because if you are, I'm not giving you a reference. Or if I give you a reference and you stop coming to church, I'm going to call your boss and complain about you. Yeah, I was in there a little while ago, man. Oh, they treated me so bad. There was a cockroach in my food or whatever, All I want to do is humble myself. And if God wants to exalt me, let him do that. But it's a biblical principle that in God's economy and God's way of doing things is that you and I as Christians, what we do is we humble ourselves. We go lower and then let God do whatever he wants to do. And it happens all the time. I see it all the time. Christians who they're just doing their work, they're just humbling themselves, and God exalts them to higher positions. It might be at work, again, it might be on a team. I see it all the time. But maybe you're looking for a certain position. Let God do it. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. That's what we're seeing here. And then we have in this section the repurposing of the censers. We like that. Recycling, repurposing. We like that. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, tell Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, to pick up the censers out of the blaze. So the stuff's burning, for they are holy. Scatter the fire some distance away. The censers of these men who sinned against their own souls, let them be made into hammered plates as a covering for the altar, because they presented them before the Lord. Therefore they are holy, and they shall be a sign to the children of Israel. So Eleazar did that. He took these bronze censers, emptied out the contents, had them hammered into a covering for the altar. Why? We're told in verse 40, so that they would be a reminder. Every time someone saw the covers for the altar, they would say, oh, that cover has been made out of the censers of the 250 guys who stood against Moses and Aaron. And they would go, man, the censers are still here, the guys are not. Let's not go the way of the 250. Let's not join the rebellion of Korah. It would be a reminder to them. Finally, beginning in verse 41, we have our third and final main division, which is the residual rebellion. This is insane to me, absolutely insane. Verse 41. On the next day, all the congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron. And you along with me are thinking, are you kidding me? Really? But what it does is this reveals to us, it shows us the sin that was deep-rooted in their hearts. These were, yes, they were God's people. They said, Korah said it right, they were a holy people. God was with them. But that didn't mean that they were sinless. And they had sin deep-rooted in there. Let's find out what happens. Verse 41, here's what they said at the end of verse 41. They complained, they said, you've killed all the people of the Lord. Why would you kill God's people? Moses didn't do that. God did. Verse 42, now it happened when the congregation had gathered against Moses and Aaron that they turned toward the tabernacle of meeting. And suddenly the cloud covered it. It's the cloud of the Lord, the covering, the presence of God. And the glory of the Lord appeared. Then Moses and Aaron came before the tabernacle of meeting. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, get away from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. Moses' response again, they fell on their faces. So Moses said to Aaron, take a censer, put fire in it from the altar, put incense on it, and take it quickly to the congregation. Go out, go take it to them, and make atonement for them. Go offer the incense as a sacrifice for these people. For wrath has gone out from the Lord, the plague has begun. Then Aaron took it as Moses commanded and ran into the midst of the assembly, and already the plague had begun among the people. So he put in the incense and made atonement for the people, and he stood between the dead and the living, so the plague was stopped. This is incredible. What an incredible act of service here, of selflessness. These are people that are complaining against Moses and Aaron again, just after the Korah incident the day before. And you would think that at some point Moses and Aaron would just say, you know what, God, you're right. These people are messed up. And you know what, you want to destroy them? I think you should. Just get rid of them right now. And let's start over brand new. Start over with a brand new nation. But instead, what these guys do is they go and they pray on behalf of the people. That's what they're doing here. By Aaron going and standing between the living and the dead, he stops the plague. God stops the plague because of that. This is what you call intercession. When you are praying for someone, and you pray, you're praying, but you pray on behalf of somebody else. Lord, please help my mom, or help my sister, or please help my friend, or you pray for somebody else. You're interceding. You're standing in the gap, so to speak. You're praying for somebody else. And in this case, what are they doing? They're praying or standing in the gap on behalf of their enemies. Good night, nurse. Who does that? Who does that? People of God. So in verse 49, those who died in the plague were 14,700, besides those who died in the Korah incident. So Aaron returned to Moses at the door of the tabernacle of meeting, for the plague had stopped. Proverbs 14:30. You know what? I am so sorry. I get all excited, start preaching like a Baptist, and I forget to put these things up here. In this residual rebellion, we saw an accusation against Moses and Aaron. And then in verses 46 through 48, we saw the atonement that they made on behalf of their own enemies. But look what Proverbs 14:30 says. A sound heart is life to the body, but envy is rottenness to the bones. Rottenness to the bones. In Romans 13:13, Paul said, let us walk properly as in the day, not in revelry and drunkenness. That's let's not live a party lifestyle, getting drunk all the time. Not in lewdness and lust. Speaking of sexual desires and actions, we don't live that way. Not in strife. Strife is fighting with people, and not in strife and envy. Envy's part of all of that nastiness, and that's not to be characteristic of you and I as Christians. And then lastly, 1 Corinthians 13:4, Paul said, love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up. And the classic test for 1 Corinthians chapter 13, that's the love passage. That's the one that you young ladies in a few years when you get married, you'll want the pastor to read that at your wedding ceremony. Love is this, and love is that, and love is this, and love is that. But the classic test for 1 Corinthians 13 is to take out the word love and put your name in there. Chris suffers long and is kind. Chris does not envy. Chris does not parade himself. Chris is not puffed up. And can you go through there with your name in those slots, and does it sound right? Or do you go through and you go, oh, that doesn't sound right. That's not really me. I don't live that way. That's the test. This is how believers are supposed to be living. Genuine love, agape love. Unconditional, self-sacrificial love for everybody. For everybody. Allies and enemies alike. That's what we saw through the life of Moses here. There was an old preacher named D.L. Moody, long time ago, really cool guy, really cool author. But he used to use this story when he was talking about envy, about these two eagles, and one was an envious eagle, and he was watching this other eagle just soar through the sky. And this envious eagle saw this hunter come along, and he spoke to the hunter and said, you know what, I'd really like it if you shot that eagle down out of the sky. And so the hunter says, well, I'd love to, but I need a feather for my arrow. And so the envious eagle, no problem, I'll give you a feather, pulled out a feather from its wing and gave it, and the hunter fastened it to the arrow and pulled back and let go and missed the eagle because it was flying too high. And the original eagle that was down there talking to the hunter, he was so envious, he gets even filled with rage. He's so angry. And what he does is the hunter says, well, I need another feather. And so he pulls out another feather and continues pulling out another feather and another feather and another feather until finally the hunter realized this eagle can't fly anymore. It's rendered itself flightless. And he attacked that eagle and took that one and forgot about the one that was flying high. But you see, that's one of the things that envy does, is it keeps us from doing what we're supposed to do. Eagles are meant to fly. It should have not been bothered with the other eagle or with the hunter. But it should have just been doing what it was supposed to do, what it was made to do, to soar, to fly. But envy will ground us, and it will cause us to lose out, and it will rot me from the inside out. And as believers, we can't live that way. We've got to be living filled with joy, knowing what God's purpose is and being content with that. God, whatever position you want me in, that's where I want to be. Father, help us, please.